So they finally did it. Panasonic has released a sequel to the Panasonic G9 with the G9 II. And this is the very first Micro Four Thirds camera using Panasonic's new phase detect hybrid autofocus system. And as anybody knows who's been a Panasonic owner, like myself with my Panasonic G85, that is really the only main weakness that Panasonic cameras have, because other than that, they're probably going to offer you more than any other competitor, especially at this price range. And autofocus was the main reason why I really switched or got another camera from my G85 to my Sony a7 IV full frame camera, which is what I'm shooting with right now. And so you might be wondering, why would I be excited about a brand new Micro Four Thirds camera when I already have a Sony a7 IV full frame camera? Well, after having using my Sony for a little over a year now, there's definitely things that I miss about using a Panasonic camera. And so the first thing is the menu system. I would say the Panasonic menu system is just so much better, especially versus the Sony system, which to me is really confusing, complex. And whenever I go back to my Panasonic, it's just so much more intuitive. The way that things are laid out, the features that it has, it's just so much easier to use. And that is a really important thing, especially if you're going to be using this on a regular basis. And then the second thing is something that people might not really think about until they go over to a different system, and that is the out of camera look. There's just something about the whole Panasonic look that looks more film-like. And even though you could definitely take any footage and grade it and make it look like any other camera, the out of camera look, I think, is better with the Panasonic camera. And then the third thing is, since this is a Micro Four Thirds camera, it has a smaller sensor, but most importantly, it has smaller and cheaper lenses. This is such a huge thing, and for some people this is the main reason why they might stay in a particular system. And then when you think about the overall weight and size, carrying around a full frame camera, especially if you're vlogging, is not an easy thing. And then the final really big feature for me that I miss from my Panasonic camera is the stabilization. The stabilization on this is just fantastic. And even though the Sony a7 IV has really good stabilization, especially when you turn on active stabilization, when you compare it to Panasonic, it's just not at the same levels. So let's take a look at some of the new features of the Lumix G9 II. And if you're first seeing this, you might be thinking, isn't this the full frame S5 II and S5 II X body? Well, it basically is. They share the same body. About the only difference is this one doesn't have fans because this is more of a photo-centric camera. So it does have to be more durable, more resistant to dust and other weather environments, because most people are could be using this for photography. And in terms of the actual sensor itself, it is using a 25.2 megapixel MOS sensor. And this is practically the same sensor as the GH6 with some additional features. And so some of the key things here is that it basically has the same features of the GH6 when it comes to the dynamic range. 13 stop, it does have full V-Log, and the dynamic range boost works differently here because it seems like it's active instead of only towards certain ISO ranges. And also it does have more AI powered recognitions for autofocus, so vehicles, animals, and so forth. That's going to be really helpful. And then in terms of other things, it has 60 frames per second autofocus mode. So, you know, you're doing burst shooting, this is going to be really great. It also has pre-shutter release as well, which is something I think the GH6 has. And also, at least for me, this is a big thing. It now has a new image stabilization with 8 stops of in-body image stabilization. And so far from what I've seen with some people testing this out, this is probably the best stabilization system out right now. And also another great feature that it has that is carried over from the GH6 and the full frame S5 cameras is real-time LUT function, which is really helpful. And also you get some new Leica monochrome black and white modes, and also it has that 100 megapixel high resolution mode. And since the stabilization is so good, there's also a mode that you could actually shoot this with without a tripod. And other things it has is 420 10-bit Apple ProRes and external SSD via USB. So this camera, even though marketed as a photograph camera, it has a lot of video features. And I would basically say this is a GH6 6.2 version. So this is the better version of the GX6. And when you look at all of those things, it has a lot of really great compelling features for people who've been waiting for a Micro Four Thirds camera with great autofocus. So now that you're seeing the amazing features of the G9 II, is this a camera that I'm gonna get? Well, this is something that I have been thinking about because I was looking for a secondary camera that is smaller, lighter, and cheaper, because when you do have a full frame camera, well, things are bigger. So this is a Sony a7 IV prime lens, and prime lenses are typically smaller than a zoom lens, but in the whole full frame versus Micro Four Thirds, there is a huge difference. These are bigger, heavier, and more expensive. And so the G9 II is actually the ideal camera for me. However, there are a few reasons why, well, it might not be the camera for me right now. Starting with the price. So as of the release of this camera, for the body alone, it's $1,900 US. And then if you get a lens with it, it's around $2,400. And that is very close and sometimes the same price as full frame cameras. For example, the Panasonic S5 II is basically around the same price, maybe about $100 or $200 more. And if you get an S5 IIX, it's about $300 more. And typically these cameras do go on sale, so there could be times where it could actually be at the same price or even cheaper versus a Micro Four Thirds. So that is the first and probably the most important thing, is the price. The second thing is the ecosystem. Even though the Micro Four Thirds has a really vast ecosystem that's been around for a very long time for Panasonic Olympus cameras, the thing is, more and more manufacturers are already heading towards full frame, including Panasonic. So all the newest lenses, the best selection of lenses, is in the full frame world. And with the Sony system, they have the best full frame ecosystem right now. And then finally, it's this whole Micro Four Thirds versus full frame. If you're looking towards the future, then, well, I think most cameras are going to be heading towards full frame. Now, I would say there's still a room for Micro Four Thirds. However, this is going to make it even more challenging because they're going to be releasing more lenses, cheaper options, smaller bodies, but still getting all the benefits of full frame. So that makes it a really difficult decision. And I would say for me, if this was a little bit cheaper, maybe with the lens and everything around $2,000 or $2,200, then I would definitely get it because this is something that would suit my needs and all those other benefits of having a Panasonic camera. So those are my thoughts on the Panasonic G9 II. So I would like to know what your thoughts are on this. And also, what do you think about Micro Four Thirds versus full frame or even versus APS-C? Leave it in the comments area below. And if you did enjoy these videos, be sure to share, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you on another episode. For serious YouTubers, check out TubeBuddy, the premier tool news at geekoutdoors.com. Get more done today by checking out the affiliate link in the description area below.